Okay. Cha. Silver Ring Runningcloud here. I was going to come on 3 hours ago. I was kind of doing a marathon today. I didn't sleep all night, and I haven't slept well in a couple of few days. And, well, that's not true. I slept pretty well a couple of nights ago, but just not last night, not so much the night before, because of the people breaking in. I was sort of napping during the day, but I was signing up to get on because my the charge was coming out of my machine. I was losing my battery power, and I found that they've hacked my computer a bit, so it was charging really slow. And in the meantime, I was checking out Gina Marie to see what she had to say about life. And she was talking about your house is a reflection of your mentality, your mindset. So I cleaned up my room a little bit, not perfect, but better than before, put the bed together, got rid of some junk. There was some junk over there. Because I'd kind of quit doing it because I was losing so much hope in ever getting rescued. I had put so much hope in these fantastic ideas, about being able to leave the planet because the problems are so entrenched and unsolvable, and the racism is just killing me, literally. The bioweapons have started multiplying again inside of me. I can't help but think it has something to do with these Starlink launches and the Falcon 9 launches. I can't help but think it has something to do with Elon Musk. Because once I announced I was leaving Twitter, just like when I announced I was leaving the University of Massachusetts and got infected with Morgellons, when I said I was leaving Twitter within a week of my announcing that, Marcus puts that worm that got into my ear. So there's still things in my ear. My ears are still, I try to keep them covered so the fibers don't go in, but my ears are still being infected. The infection in my gums and teeth is spreading. And the bottom line is it's a bioweapon. But nobody's listening to me. Everybody's ignoring me. So these bioweapons that they're testing in this concentration camp are being tested so that they can be deployed upon the enemies of the Europeans. And the Europeans, like Elon Musk, the Nazi, the descendant of Werner von Braun, they want to acquire everything. They want control over all the land, all the assets, all the property, and they want everyone that disagrees with them either turned around through nanobots in their head or destroyed. Well, just like all the outrageous things that happened to me because of my elite position in life, because of the affluence I was born into and my contributions to the affluence to keep my family moving forward, like, going to the Ivy League, things like that. Because of those kinds of things I did, saying low power charger connected. Because I was doing those things, I was unable to get ahead. And I was also victim to the kinds of things that other people were not a victim to. So it's the same with these bioweapons. It's the very same kind of a situation where the attack that's happening on me is absolutely unbelievable, but it's very real. You see, last week, these shadows in my face were retreating. My teeth were feeling more healthy, not painful. But since they've been launching these Starlinks, I'm getting worse and worse. And I'm not having any new infection variables. No new infection vectors are able to reach me. So it's something outside. And once you hear that 5G is involved and things like that, I'm just trying to let you know that I'm under attack from bioweapons. And you can continue to ignore me, but they're only going to increase. Now, today I heard that the case against Donald Trump has ended and he's found guilty on all parts, on all charges. And that's just so interesting to me because you have to remember that judges decide which cases have merit or not. And ever since Donald Trump lost the election, everything he does has been attacked by his enemies. And that's been a problem for me because every experience I've had with the courts in America and law enforcement in America have not represented me, protected me, worked for me. Even when I was the victim of crime, even when a drunken driver ran into my car and we had to go to the police station in Chicago, the police wouldn't even give the drunken driver a ticket, even though he reeked of liquor. They protected the corporation. That's the decision that they made. I have to take Foxy into the bathroom because he's crying. So this is going to be very short. I'm going to have to get him out of there in a few minutes, so I'll try to wrap it up by then. My symptoms are increasing. I'm getting sicker. In terms of me believing that some off-world solution is going to come, I don't think that's going to happen. In terms of me believing that the earthquakes and things like that are actually going to lead to a rescue of the people on the earth, I don't believe that's going to happen. Okay? I'm going to keep that option open and do a Commander Runningcloud log on the bioweapons today. But what I'm doing here in Ignored to Death is dealing with this reality, the reality we're all living in today. So I'm disappointed about what happened to Donald Trump, but I'm also afraid. I'm afraid because it is even more proof that our laws are infected with injustice, that there is no integrity in our judicial system. Even the law that the New York House of Representatives, New York State House of Representatives, I posted, I think her name is Colony. I can't remember her name, but you can find it in my posts that there's a New York House of Representatives representative who has written a bill. It doesn't have a number on it, so it hasn't gone through any official procedures. At this point, it's just a piece of paper. But she's written a bill to defund NPR. NPR makes so much trouble. They choose the enemies of America and create propaganda against them. They created propaganda against Narendra Modi. Prime Minister Modi has visited a different place in India every single day. He has met people in India of different castes and different colors and different professions and different living conditions. He has really, 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 really participated in the life of the Indian people and gone out of his way, expending massive energy and funds to get to know the people of India and what they need and what they want and the problems that they're facing. And the crowds that come out to see him are as big as the crowds, bigger than the crowds that go to see Donald Trump. Huge crowds go to see Narendra Modi. And NPR went out of their way to find criticism of him. Now, the case of the Dalits, the untouchable class in India, is old. When I was at Yale, I actually met a member of the Dalit who was telling me about the caste-based prejudice against him and his people. They generally tend to be the people that dig the graves and carry the garbage. They tend to be the people that you would find on the first floor if you were to look at that movie from Korea called The 8 Show. They're the people that sort of deal with the waste of the society traditionally. And that's how they became untouchable, because they would actually touch the dead to bury them. They would actually touch the things that other people didn't want to touch. But that's just the story around them. Okay, that's just sort of how they got their caste origin story, their ontological story of their caste. And a lot of people with different interests and skills and ability are in that group, just like among everyone, right? We all have different skills and abilities and talents, regardless of our race, caste, class, tribes, because we're all created individually by God. So this problem with the Dalits in India is a problem related to the caste system in India. But I have seen Narendra Modi move from caste to visit people. I've seen him be very aggressive about his message to represent everyone. Well, NPR didn't want to present that. They wanted to influence the public against a man who's doing a lot of work to unify a huge country of India, a country with the most deep spiritual roots of any country on earth that I'm aware of. But NPR wants their enemies. NPR wants to be enemies with China. They want us to pick fights with China. They want us to be enemies with Russia. They presented a story today about a Ukraine soldier who is a prisoner of war. I'm a prisoner of war being attacked with bioweapons, perhaps made in the Ukraine. Why would NPR privilege the story of a Ukrainian when we have Russians that have been living in America? When I lived in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, the Ukrainians were the Europeans that were looked down upon. They lived on the west side of town, and they were considered born criminals and low-down, dirty dogs. There were jokes about Ukrainians being made by the Europeans from Ireland and England and Germany and Scotland. They were laughing at the Ukrainians because they were the Eastern Europeans. And during the Cold War, that just justified discrimination against the Russians that lived here. But here's the thing you must never forget. The Russians are Europeans. And when the Russians and Ukrainians go to war, if, like the Germans and the Jews, they find their way here, they're going to have no problem deciding whose side they're on and what kind of Americans they're going to be. They're going to be European nationalists. Watch that movie called The King's Man if you want to see the history of the leadership in Russia. Now, don't get me wrong. Let me say it again and again and again. Americans love everybody. I was going to do my broadcast a couple of hours ago. Instead, I watched Sergei Baklikov do the tour of the White Knights period in Russia. And I watched him go to places that I had watched him go through during the Russian winter, when they were covered with snow and there was just one or two people walking around, to now, when at 10, 11 o'clock at night, it's as bright as 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon here. And there are people and live bands where there was only one live band. Now there are 3 or 4, 2 or 3, I don't know. And chatting with the people over there. So I don't have a problem with the European Russians. I really don't. But I don't for 1 minute fool myself by thinking that they're not Europeans as much as the Germans, the Khazarian Jews, the French, the British, the Scottish, when it comes to the values and respect for life of brown and black true Americans. I don't fool myself, because I met Maria Tomashko. Maria Tomashko's family were Russian immigrants in the 1950s during the Cold War. I met Elizabeth Petrov. Elizabeth Petrov's family is Russian. And Elizabeth and Maria made sure that I didn't get my doctorate. They were each serving as my advisor and did absolutely nothing but let me know that they don't understand how Frederick Douglass could read and that they don't have to honor oral contracts that they make with me to help me get my doctoral. So I don't fool myself at all. I love them, but I don't expect them to love me because I expect them to follow European nationalist racism automatically like the ones here do, like Tina Ainley in the Arizona Superior Court. So when I hear today, what happened to Donald Trump, I feel deeply disappointed because unlike the other Europeans, Donald Trump really did close the border. And once he closed the border, he stopped slave labor coming from South America and Mexico through the Mexican border. He stopped it, and it completely changed Arizona. It put a lot of companies out of business before COVID even struck because they didn't have the slave labor anymore. Well, they're still building. Some European investors have been stealing the water from the tribes. They've been sending fentanyl into the tribal lands. They've made sure that the supply chain for fresh food isn't getting there. They put heavy metals in the legalized marijuana in Arizona. And they've been building huge edifices that cover acres of land because they're mining. They're mining for the silica that's used to make microchips. They're mining for the gold. They're mining for the silver, and they're calling it private. And more of them are going there. And I know that they had cities. They were building entire cities that were ghost towns because they were probably expecting the Ukrainians to come and move in, knowing that the Ukrainians will help to continue to kill the real Americans, the Navajo, the Pima, the Apaches, the Inca, the Tadanos, and all the other tribes that I don't even know the names of that are still surviving in Arizona, but being denied access to economic equality. Scottsdale, Wickenburg, Cave Creek, Gold Streak, Gold Globe, Arizona, Gold Streak. And the reason that the Arizona elites and rulers and governors and police force and courts decided to come after me and target me and kidnap me off the road with no reason, I'm going to tell you the story of how they did that when I come back. No, I think I'm okay with the power on my machine right now. And Foxy, I usually wash him off after he goes to the bathroom. So I'm just going to hold him here for a couple of minutes. The reason that they went after me was because they wanted to continue their building. But once Donald Trump eliminated all of the illegal aliens from Arizona, they didn't have enough people to run the road gangs anymore. They just didn't have enough people. They didn't have enough staff to do the surveillance, to block the roads. There wasn't a road in Arizona that I didn't go to, not a single rest stop where I didn't go to, where within minutes of my arrival, somebody that followed me arrived. And sometimes it'd just be the two of us there because I was under surveillance. I was under surveillance till I became such a threat, documenting the building that they were doing in Scottsdale, documenting empty malls, documenting corporate buildings that ran into the railroad tracks that came out of Dick's Sporting Goods. There weren't even enough sportsmen to go to that Dick's Sporting Goods. But out there between Tucson and Phoenix, they were really stealing a lot of Indian land and building these places where they want to continue to build data centers and make silicone chips and electric cars, and all using stolen land and assets. And they didn't want me to keep documenting that. So they kidnapped me. I was parked in a legal spot on the highway between Las Vegas and Phoenix. And I had already given the ultimatum to that mind control game where Elon Musk was pretending to be a part of the good future I was expecting for myself that also involved Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump hand-delivered almost $1 billion to the American Indians on the reservations, whatever that is. That's a construction, prisoner of war, concentration camp, reservation, ghetto. There's no difference. It means real Americans that the European nationalists want to rob from. And Donald Trump made sure that the HBCU administrators would not have to make a trip to Washington, D.C. each year to beg for their federal dollars. Fewer federal dollars than the endowed universities committing plagiarism and spying and stealing American intellectual property to send to Israel. Less money than they got. Donald Trump also passed an executive order about the value of the individual in some of his first steps to actually confront European nationalist racism against Black Americans. The reason why the European nationalist courts, including their boule sycophants like Fannie Willis, the reason they went after Donald Trump, the reason they went after the January 6th and set them all up is because if Donald Trump were to get to power, all Americans would be that much closer to the American dream, the real American dream. The real American dream is that no matter what your race, no matter what body you got here in, if you can do the job, you can have a job. If you've got a skill or talent, you're going to get the social space and the economic rewards for your skill or talent. America was supposed to be free for everyone. That's why so many people tried to come here, because they said, hey, in India, I'll always be a Dalit. I'll never be a Brahmin. I'll never be the head. I'll always be the feet. What can I do about that? In England, they said, hey, I wasn't born into a royal family. I'll never be a lord with land and assets granted to me from all over the world, from conquests. I'm going to go to America, where if I work hard, I can get rewarded for it. That was the draw of the immigrants to this land of abundance. That was the reason people came. That was the reason that people in other nations held America up as an ideal utopian society. But they ignored what the Europeans were doing to the real Americans. And eventually, what was happening to me and my people was erased from the public conversation. And groups like NPR and PBS, well, they got online. PBS does Finding Your Roots, which is pretty much does the job that Marcus Garvey did. Marcus Garvey was a leader around the Harlem Renaissance. And instead of fighting for the rights of the brown and black-skinned people that had always been here before the Europeans got here, that were owning more than 50% of the rich lands of the South, rather than help fight for that, Marcus Garvey started a Back to Africa movement and got a lot of black people, especially in New York City, got them dreaming about going back to Africa, even though Africa was under extreme colonialism. But I believe they did send some people to Libya, or Liberia, maybe was the name of the place. Maybe they colonized Liberia. I'm not really sure. I know that a lot of people did go, but more importantly, I know that they took Black American assets and spent that money to try to start a life in Africa. And Here we are 100 years later, and Africa is still fighting to control their own assets and have wealth for their own people. And men like Muammar Gaddafi, who fought for the people to change their monetary system, he was totally assassinated. And we had the American press over here totally controlled by the enemy, totally a blood libel tool. We had them having ignorant Americans in the workplaces chanting, that madman Gaddafi, kill that madman Gaddafi. And the only thing that made Gaddafi a madman was his desire to bring African assets to benefit the African people. But they said, oh, he's committed horrible offenses against his people. Like the Ku Klux Klan wasn't? Like the Ku Klux Klan wasn't driving my people off their land? Like weather modification systems were not distorting the agricultural profits and creating more deserts and more desert lands? You know, I don't want to implicate too many of the people, that I watch. But as I'm being attacked by these bioweapons and being a political prisoner in this room and being denied of my inheritances that would give me enough power to hire people and have influence. You see, but then they just drag me in their courts like they did Donald Trump. I mean, part of the Revolutionary War valorized men like the January 6th men. Men that said, hey, we saw the results of the election being distorted and changed. We saw it happening. And we know that the German Nazis from Germany created these machines. And we know that before you could automatically steal the vote, people in Chicago were just stealing boxes of ballots and hiding them. How many reports have you heard throughout America about League of Women Voters, volunteers, vote counters that were actually stealing legitimate ballots? NPR should actually do a story about how many counties in America have reported election fraud, instead of going all over the world to say those people are bad and creating negative influences against foreigners, instead of doing the story of Silver Rain Runningcloud and the injustices that have happened to me right here, the human rights violations that would compete with any human rights violations that you find in the world happen right here. Do you know that in the 1970s, the Chicago Reader did an expose about the Shakespeare District law enforcement torturing real Americans, real Black Americans, with electrodes on their genitals? They had a room for torture for Black people. And that was where I actually ended up going when the European drunken driver bashed right into my beautiful, beautiful Honda Celica. And they didn't even give him a ticket. They just laughed at me. They laughed at me with that face, the same kind of face that Associate Dean Hirsch at Yale University had when I told him about the plagiarism from Hazel Carby. Just a smile like, we don't care about you. We're the Europeans. We're the Jews. Our agenda is not to make sure that you enjoy America. We want your inheritance. So as far as you're concerned, there is no police force. You don't have any protection. So it's a very sad day when you find that a man who could have made a difference suffers the same way the people that he wanted to help suffer every day. Some real Americans, Black Americans from the East Coast, California, the Midwest, the Southwest, were saying that one of the reasons that they turned to Trump and away from Biden and the Democratic Party is because if the European nationalist law enforcement judiciary is pushing this hard, going this hard against Donald Trump? It's because he's one of us. He's trying to be a real American. He's trying to fight for liberty and justice in the American way, which is the potential of social equality for every decent, hardworking person in this nation. When the Arizona state troopers pulled me over, it was after I had decided that the Elon Musk thing was just a mind-controlled delusion thing, that there was nothing to it. Because when it came time for the test, and I actually saw Werner von Braun, and I actually saw the Elon Musk hologram, and I actually got the feeling, and I actually saw the woman in the high heels who was the lady in the red dress from The Matrix, in terms of her, direct communication with me in a crowd that looked ambiguous to signal the moment. Once I decided that I was through with that, that's when the Arizona State Troopers came after me. They came after me very shortly after that. Maybe that might have no, that wasn't the visit. That visit was around Christmas. And the Arizona State Troopers kidnapped me around February. Now, if you've listened to the story or you've seen it on Facebook, if they haven't erased it and deleted it, you would know that I was at a legal stop making Twitter posts. But the drivers in the road gang supposedly told the police where I was and told the police I was acting funny. I was in my car using my iPhone to show the traffic pattern that I had described before, of one car with regular lights, followed by a car on the inside with the brights on. So the first car is hiding the brights. So you don't see the brights until they're close to you and in your eyes. And then behind that, a truck. And behind that truck, another car set back with bright lights. And there were at least 7 trucks in the sequence, and they were always the same. And I had described it to my audience. But now I was showing them the actual fact of it, because twilight had come. And since I've gotten over 65, twilight is a hard time for me to see. There's even a name for that kind of blindness. So I'd pulled over on the side of the road because I'd driven that route so many times that I knew how to find the partially obscured inlets that lead to the ranches on the property. And this particular ranch where I was parked actually had gotten an award from the Rangelands organization, a European nationalist organization that gives support and data information to the European nationalist racists that were stealing the Indian lands. So I had been targeted. I'm driving down a road to Wickenburg, and a truck shows up and backs me into a post that's hidden in the brush. And I end up crashing the rear end of my car. But when they sold my car, that was a salvage vehicle, Carfax did not report the body damage to the car. The car had body damage on it, but if you look at the Carfax report for that VIN number, there's no car damage reported. And because Geico committed insurance fraud from their fraud department by denying my claim, there's no record of the accident. 2 accidents that damaged that car. The police breaking the window of my car to get me out of my car. When the policeman said, "Open your window," I said, "Well, do you want my credentials?" He said, "No." And that routine went on about 5 or 6 times. Open your window, because they wanted me to open my window so they could breach my vehicle, so they could drag me out of my car and drag me off to jail or shoot me and leave me to rot in the desert. But I was broadcasting live on social media the entire time. From before they even stopped me, I was broadcasting on social media, because I had been broadcasting from the rest stop that I was in. And they said that I was parked in the middle of the road, which was a lie. They had no charges against me. They had so much law enforcement come out, almost as much law enforcement as they had come after me at that comedy club in Scottsdale. So I have seen how much control of the law enforcement and judiciary process enemies of freedom in America have and possess. Through their blood libel strategies, they were able to accelerate their possession of the very execution of fairness and justice. And my first encounter with it was when a man let his dog out to bite my son. We were going to soccer lessons with the American Soccer Association, or American Youth, AYS or something, American Youth Soccer. And they had a coach directly from a German team teaching the classes. And there was a Jew named Alan who was one of the lawyers for the First Ward gangsters, the Al Capone heirs. And his name was Alan. And when Alan saw me coming, he walked outside with his dog, and his dog attacked my child. And my mother was a lawyer, so we took Alan to court. And the judge did not find Alan guilty. And Alan smirked. And when Alan put me on the stand, he tried to make me sound like an abusive mother that was shouting at my child and grabbing and abusing him, because he had awareness that the Jews in news and Jews in broadcasting were publishing a lot of stories about abusive Black mothers, abusive welfare mothers, because they were working very hard to undo the stereotype based in truth of the Black American mammy, the Black American moral leader, the mother of our country, the one who raised so many European immigrant children. And they wanted to undo that. So Alan tied right into that in the court. But it didn't work. It didn't matter. My son was still bitten. My son still had to go to the hospital for a nip from a dog. But that's when I learned that if you're a Jew working for the mafia and somebody sues you, you're going to get off. Now, as I understand it, he was found guilty, but he had to pay an amount, very, very small amount. I believe he was fined. I think my mother told me that. But when I saw how unfairly the trial went, I had already kind of made my decision. But I'd already noticed that if you were traveling on the highway to Northbrook, on the Edens Expressway, or even on the Roosevelt Highway going west, you could speed as much as you want and there wouldn't be a single cop out there. But if you were headed south on Lakeshore Drive, you better not speed, because the cops would be waiting for you. If you were going to be driving through any of the American neighborhoods, you were going to find police on the highway. But if you were going where the European suburbs are, you wouldn't find a single police car. You could speed as much as you wanted to, and you wouldn't get a ticket. So I had noticed that too. So in terms of Europeans using law enforcement to intimidate, torture, prosecute, and oppress real American people, obviously, when Tina Ainley, I got to hear, because of COVID, they were doing everything through the telephone, and they called it telephonic. But they didn't know enough about the technology to know that Microsoft Teams had a conference phone, and that when they were in the judge's quarters talking, the public defenders and the prosecutors and the judge, that I could hear every word they were saying. I could hear their derisive attitudes towards the Americans named Alvarez, towards the Americans from the Navajo Nation, from me, people like me. And I could hear them give the European criminals almost praise for being criminals. And even when they were admitted back into the prison system, they were treated with respect and admiration. Because you must never forget that the founder of the Mormons, and the Mormons were big in the Oregon Trail. They were big Europeans that moved out west. He was a known psychopath driven out of Eastern American lands, tarred and feathered at least twice. And then he comes up with this story that God spoke to him through a hat. And he found enough other people to follow him. And they were practicing polygamy. They were abusing women. They were sexually molesting the little girls and boys in their huge families. They were committing incest because they were a band of psychopaths. Because only psychopaths would commit the kind of heinous crimes that the Europeans committed to enforce the idea that Americans should live on reservations and be separated from the economic bloodline of their assets, just like they did in Africa. But now they're putting satellites in the sky. Elon Musk and the other Nazis have the power to be in outer space, putting satellites in the sky, and the bioweapons in me are being activated to a new level of activity. I'm scared to death. I'm scared to death because they're not killing me. They're just testing their bioweapons on me. And when I listen to NPR, I have to listen to NPR tell stories of things happening in other countries that they select for their political agenda. Well, I know that I live in America. I know that if Maria Tomashko had not been forced to live in a Black community and be economically deprived because she was from Russia, her ancestors were from Russia, and she was a first-generation Russian immigrant. I know if they had not discriminated against her, she would not have been so eager to prove her loyalty by prosecuting and persecuting and denying me my ascent into the economy. So it's a sad day for America because of what happened to Donald Trump. But let me repeat, that's not even the real Donald Trump. It's just a political effigy to let everybody know, oh, freedom for the minorities who are the majority? Nah. We have firms lined up to build silicon manufacturing, to take away the semiconductor industry importation, so that we can make chips that are even more military and hidden from the public. Shouldn't Starlink have to release all of their schematics, all of their plans, all of their programming, all of their operations to the public? Should they really be allowed to communicate with things that they have built here? In Houston, we have lights that are at least 50 feet up in the sky. They're at least 30 feet up in the sky, maybe even 50. And they have big lights on them, big bright lights on them. And you'll find them by every hotel, by every exit stop. You'll find them everywhere. And they are not here for street lights. They are some kind of communications device. But they don't have to tell us. NPR doesn't have to tell us about cybercrime in America. They can attack Prime Minister Modi and the Indian caste system. They don't have to look at their own European national racism as it's played out in my life. At every decade of my life, the Europeans have put a block that blocks everything I achieved during each decade of my life. Until I find myself living here, unable to sleep because of the pain from the bioweapons, unable to leave because of the enemies and road gangs that attack me with projectile weapons. And I just have to admit that although people like Elena Daana, Daana, talk about communicating with the intergalactics, all the people she's talking to are Europeans. She's having a conference coming out. Stephen Greer isn't going to be there. Carrie Cassidy isn't going to be there. The real leaders in ufology are not going to be there, and they're going to talk about, how to talk to your angel guides, how to improve your consciousness. And they're going to go right in the middle of Indian country. They're going to fly in on planes that Americans can't afford to fly in on in the Denver airport. And they're going to go someplace beautiful in Colorado, these Europeans, to talk about UFOs. Right? And when I look at Elena's work and I see her idealized Europeans that she says are the alien races, and they're all Europeans, it just fills me with despair. It just makes me think, wow, the Europeans succeed in this genocide here. And all the ETs are just like them, wanting us dead, working with them, wanting us dead. They don't even see us. How can you have an elevated consciousness if you're killing the real Americans? Elena isn't even an American. She's Italian or French or something. But she's going to have an economic prosperity experience right here in America while I'm a political prisoner here. And she's not even going to address that while saying that she represents the future and the future civilizations. Well, here's something I believe. When I was going to the Ivy League, I thought that I was going to be above European nationalist racism, because I was young and naive. I was 30, and each phase of the way I've been young and naive because I can't anticipate what my enemies are going to do, because I don't spend my time scheming against people. I spend my time thinking of ways to help people, thinking of ways to communicate, taking care of myself, planning for my future, fighting for my inheritance. I don't spend my time trying to figure out how to mess you up and your people, but the European nationalists do. That's their intention. That's their purpose. That's the way they have an economic system outside of their geographic origins. They get their economic system by preying on everyone that really has prosperity in their land, that has the basis for economic success, not the constructed system that relies upon initiatory force, as my friends at Neothink say. Mark Hamilton of Neothink says there would be no such thing as racism if individuals were protected and empowered, and he's absolutely right. And that's what I thought we had here in America. I thought the Ku Klux Klan was behind us. I didn't know that they had subsumed themselves into the Rotary Club and gone international. All the way in Iceland, you can find the Rotary Club. I didn't know that the Ku Klux Klan became the Lions Club and created road gangs using road clubs, they have road clubs all over Arizona, racing tracks that are not for the public, that are maybe used for one public race a year, where they exchange data, where they train themselves to follow people. I even met a man who told me that he had a job following people. He followed some monks that were there to visit the Navajo reservation. And he was astounded by the fact that they knew the same dances. They were doing the same dances. They knew the same song because of the time when the Asiatic people were in America. You can see the ruins of homes that look like homes in old style China. You can even see a Buddha in Utah, weathered with age. But I don't get to hike there. The highways go right past everything. You have to know where the private access roads are. And you have to have permission from the Europeans to go there. And they will not give permission for economic development to real Americans. They use the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the BIA, to control the growth and to deploy weapons on the Americans. The Americans are just land placeholders till the Europeans figure out how they're going to make money and commodify the assets of the land. And they figured it out. And when I started exposing them to the world, through social media. They tried to take me out. So they kidnapped me. There were no charges. Nothing could hold. So they broke the window of my car. And I had to surrender after an hour's standoff of me saying, you have no charges, and trying to call higher and higher authorities. But when the sergeant came and cussed at me and told me I better stop before he ordered the mentally retarded policeman to actually break through my window, mentally disabled, learning disabled, obviously a learning disabled Arizona State Trooper who couldn't wait to commit violence on my car. The whole time the standoff is going on, he's moving like this, back and forth, holding his bat, because he cannot wait to break my window and make me surrender. And they handcuff me tight and put me in the back of a vehicle that's been specially designed to crunch my feet up like this, to put my knees close to me, and not enough room for my behind in all of this wavy ripple seat. Just enough room for me to lean one ass cheek in. And then he took me on a ride on a serpentine highway that went for over 20 miles. So I'm handcuffed. I'm sitting on a seat that won't let me sit straight. My knees are bent towards my body, and I can't do it. It repeats the injury, and I'm being rocked back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until they injured my spine. And like any traumatic injury, it took 36 hours for the damage to really affect me. I had to wear a body brace. In fact, I had to wear 4, because just one body brace that comes to the waist wasn't enough. I had to support my lower back and my upper back too, just so I could walk. I had to use a cane. I've had a lot of healing since then, but I was crippled. They crippled me, and then they put me in jail with no charges. And they wouldn't let me talk in court. They wouldn't let me say a word in court. They even took me out of the room during my arraignment while the other women prisoners were still there. The other inmates were still in the courtroom because they were doing the courtroom on a video, computer video, because it was COVID. Thank God it was COVID. Do you know that if it wasn't COVID, they would have thrown me in jail for contempt of court? Because during each telephonic trial, and they would be a month apart, to drag out my misery, to keep me in the court system, to keep me borderline, to keep me trapped in Arizona. And every time I had to go to the court, I tried to tell the judge that I had been kidnapped. They moved that case to 4 different courts. Catherine Kelly, Thomas Kelly, and then I think Tina Ainley. I think it was just 3 courts, but there might have been somebody between Tina Ainley who I didn't even meet because they kept changing the paperwork. They gave me 3 different copies of the police charges, 3 different copies. And the final charge was fleeing the police. Fleeing the police. I was on the phone with 911 during the entire fleeing of the police, telling them that I'm on a 2-way highway I can't pull off. Are they after me, or did they get an emergency at the rest stop? Because I got to the rest stop and 3 other cars showed up, and they said that they had been coming from Bullhead City. 3 other cars showed up with real Americans in them. So I think they were there protecting me. But the police were looking for a black woman, and I had this wig on, and I, was fair-skinned. See, the part of what the bioweapon being used against me is doing is increasing the melanin in my skin. It's increasing the color in my skin. That's why you'll see, dark patches. These dark patches here. That's the bioweapon. It's altering me at a DNA level, perhaps. Showing off, perhaps. Living in my gums and my teeth. as intelligent entities that can actually escape, living in my ears. I can see them, they're still in my ears. I'm sorry, I'm having a complex post-traumatic stress reaction secondary to European nationalist racism. Living in the past, remembering how traumatized I am and how much fear I have for the trauma ahead of me. Because my teeth are hurting so much since they've been launching those Starlinks that it's hard for me to eat now. Again. And I can feel the vibrations in my cap tooth. I have a cap tooth over here. Well, I'm being ignored to death. But believe me, they didn't create these bioweapons and test them on me just to test them on me. They're going to be deploying these in places where they are not going to send soldiers. They're going to be deploying space-borne bioweapons on people and nations with assets that the European nationalists want to control. And where they used to invade with armies, they're going to be using airborne, satellite-driven bioweaponry. They're going to be using gases in your air. They're going to be using projectiles that go into your skin. They're going to be using microfine fibers that just sneak in and assemble themselves into clusters, like the Morgellons fibers that I've shown you. These just appear. These spontaneously appear in my room. And each one is pretty much made the same. Each one pretty much made the same. You'll see a white thing and a woolly looking thing and long hairs that maybe they got from my wig. I'm not sure. But each one I find looks like this. And you can find them in the early stages of their development, where they'll just be the fibers blowing through the air. And I don't know how they get in here. I don't know if they come up, through the toilet. But I know that they self-assemble. And it looks like nothing to worry about, doesn't it? It looks like, it looks like just lint from your carpeting or something, right? But if I open that door and leave it open for a while and then take a broom and sweep around in circles, I'll be pulling these out. And I'll later find some that just magically appear. They just magically appear. Because these are self-assembling fibers. And they look non-threatening. They look like you just they look like you just have a heavy nap on your carpet. And it just keeps bringing up fibers. But when you notice that each one looks like the one before it, and you notice that they just appear, and you notice that your carpet isn't really shedding, then you have to know that somehow these are self-assembling intelligent weapons. They can get into your living quarters. They can get into your ears. They can infect you and take over your body. And maybe, for all I know, I'm growing them. Although I've seen no evidence of that. I've seen no evidence that I'm the producer of these things. They could be coming in through the plumbing. But I know I've spent many days in a fiber storm. I know I've spent many days with fibers blowing in my face, fibers attacking me. So the Europeans are not going to have armies coming anymore. They're going to be using Starlink satellites, nanotechnology, microfibers, gases. They're going to be using artificial intelligence to target you through your phone and send frequencies through your phone. They even know how to find my electrical connection and decrease the power flow so I can't charge my Chromebook here. They even know how to isolate my outlets to control the flow of electricity and control my machines. So for the Africans that are unifying and creating a united economy to serve the African people, well, your enemies, they're not going to be like Leopold, King Leopold, building roads and marching in and murdering the people, wholesale, millions of people killed. No, they're going to do it with Elon Musk's sky machine. Do you wonder why Elon Musk always says he doesn't know any aliens? Because he is one. Aliens are not alien to him because he is an ET. He's Werner von Braun. Okay? He's Werner von Braun. When he says that he doesn't know of any ETs, you see the mischievous look on his face? Yet somehow he acquired the power to control NASA, like von Braun. And somehow he's been able to create a public identity of being a good guy, like Werner von Braun on the Walt Disney show with his rocket ship. And Musk calls the rocket ship the same way. And Musk makes it clear that he's from South Africa. From South Africa, that's funny. But he made sure that his headquarters, that his birthplace was South Africa, so that he have a right to go there in case they need to fine-tune the weapons. But the Europeans are not going to let Africa go into the hands and pocketbooks of the African people without a fight. Look what they're doing to me. They're testing on me the weapons they're going to deploy worldwide. And you'll be sitting there with fibers attacking you. What are you going to say? You're in a horror movie all of a sudden? Suddenly you're in a horror movie? So please stop ignoring me. I need medical care. I need dental care. And I need it from professionals who are interested in uncovering and finding cures for the bioweapons that are being developed and deployed using Star Trek. Not Star Trek, but Starlink and 5G and other and Tesla cars. I've seen holograms of Tesla cars appear on the highways. Well, if you've got satellites, you can project holograms wherever you like, can't you? Yeah, you can. Take it from me. So I'm kind of doing a marathon because I'm really trying to get some attention. I don't want to be ignored anymore. I don't want to be tortured here another day or night without any kind of medical help. And I can't go out of here to get medical help because this city of Houston has been compromised by the Nazis since Operation Paperclip sent them in here. And half the hospitals in this area do not serve patients. They're simply places where you can ship nuclear energy weapons. You know, when Honda dealers sold me that Honda Civic Hybrid 2015, they already knew that that car caused cancer. They already knew it. If you look for a Honda 2015 hybrid on the used car market, you'd think you could find plenty of them. You won't find many of them at all because when the air conditioning broke on that car and it was still under warranty, there wasn't a dealer in Arizona that would touch that vehicle. And what they told me, I said, it causes cancer, doesn't it? Because it always had a funny smell in that car, a really funny smell from the emissions from the hybrid engine. And I ended up getting caught in a trap of financing with Honda that compromised my credit rating completely. When I left Connecticut, I had a 10-year-old vehicle that was totally paid for, but it was damaged. It had been in an accident when my kid took it out and got carjacked. And they crashed my car. And the insurance company fixed it. But the front end wasn't stable. So when I was fleeing Juan Luis Hernandez, who had been hacking my Bank of America account and siphoning my funds out, who actually drove a van up to my house to unload my property into his van, that he had gone through all my things while I was in California. Juan, who wouldn't leave my house. When I insisted he leave my house, he would break my garage door down and be a very obvious menacing threat. And while he did a whole lot of good things to help me recover from the mental health system that had pretty much written me off and made me think I'd be taking medicine forever, lost in a dream world, ineffective, unproductive, unemployable, as the state of Connecticut declared me, well, Juan broke me out of that. So, I have to be grateful to him, as well as upset about the fact that I had to leave Connecticut because of him, in order not to be beaten up and taken advantage of, and in order not to have my heart broken when he would leave. Because normal people fall in love with psychopaths because a psychopath will study you. A psychopath will love bomb you. And if you're love starved, that's a very effective strategy. So I had to leave Juan to save myself. And I even wanted to go back to him. I even tried to go back to him. But within minutes of being around him, I remembered why I considered him so dangerous, and I had to flee again. Which was fine because he was already targeting the editor of the Connecticut magazine and her girlfriend, who was even older and richer, according to Juan. He was already onto his next target, his next old lady, lonely old lady target, playing the role of a, younger man, 15 years younger than me. But I'd had another, lover, boyfriend, 15 years younger than me before him, because I used to look young before I got scarred. So people would not know my age, and the men 15 years younger than me thought I was their contemporary until I told them. And then they would still want to date me. So he wasn't the only one. He was like the third one, I think, that I had dated who was 15 years younger than me. So I didn't want my heart broken, because I knew that he was going to leave as soon as he took all my stuff and got all that he could get from me. I knew that he'd be moving on. And that time was drawing near. He was already starting to desert me and leave me out of things that had previously been projects we did together. But he did help me find myself again in terms of a sense of purpose and a work ethic. And he did get me rewarded by society when the state of Connecticut gave me the Volunteer of the Year award with him for our work in the mental health industry, volunteerism, running the May is Mental Health Awareness Month programs, going to all the meetings, working for the Connecticut Legal Rights Project. I even got appointed to their board at the Connecticut Legal Right Project. So Juan really helped to prove to me that I wasn't going to be consigned to the mental health industry forever. That I wasn't always going to have my family asking me, did you take your medicine? When I was way beyond taking medicine. I mean, if you're suffering from depression because you tried to start a business in the most lucrative industry and you were sabotaged. And you tried to be a part of a community, but all the European national racists and cliquish Jews insulted you. And you tried to get advanced degrees in academia, but they stole your work and blacklisted you. And you tried to continue to get a degree in academia, but they just ignored you. And then you get out and you find the Apple rootkit and you think, yay, I'm back on the road. I'm back in the career industry. I'm going to make my way. And you find out that they're all hackers and that Apple's not even going to give you the credit for the work that you've done. Well, that was 2009, 2010 that I found that rootkit in Apple. And I worked very hard, hours, day and night. I knew when Juan was sleeping and when he was awake by how much opposition I got fighting the hackers in my system. When I could really get in there and do a lot of work and replace my system, he was asleep. But when he woke up, he would just come in with master control over the network. My computer was a slave to his computer, and he would just erase my entire operating system upgrade. He'd just erase it and put it back to a previous version. He could even change my passwords. Do you know how scary it is to put a password in and then you cannot find that password? But I knew how to get around it. But even today, if my password doesn't work the first time, I go into a panic from the post-traumatic stress that was inflicted on me by Juan Luis Hernandez, who hacked Targeted, who was a part of the CIA targeting, who was stealing money and accepting public aid from the state of Connecticut for a spinal injury that he didn't even have. He got records from his father's medical practice as his documentation for having this injury. And he even used to go to the clinic and commit a fraud that he was his father because they had the same name with a different middle name. And he'd go to the pharmacy and get all these addictive drugs, pharmaceutical pills, from a special pharmacy that he would go to every time he'd go to the medical clinic. After passing by the cemetery where the child that he murdered in the Yale hospital was buried, named Jose Maria Hernandez. And he would tell me the story about how if somebody had put that baby in his arms, he would have smashed that baby to the floor. And that's what he did. And that's why his father lost his job at Yale University as the head of a medical department. And that's why his mother had to leave Yale University too, because their psychopath son committed infanticide on his newborn illegitimate baby. But they let him go free. And his family let him go free. And Diego Hernandez, his brother, works for the state of New York state attorney as a public prosecutor in White Plains. And Diego threatened me. So when I see what happened to Donald Trump, I know that system. And I know that the European nationalists invaded that system and took control of law enforcement and the judiciary, as well as the judicial branch of government, all the way up to the Supreme Court. There is nothing you can trust about law and order in America. They operate by the rule of law, not moral law, not common law, but rules of law. And the first rule is Jews always win, and white over black, the Hegelian binary opposition system. Okay? So what do you do when you live in a country that professes to be the land of freedom and opportunity, that actually goes out to other countries saying, we're the moral voice, we need to have the UN here to make sure you guys don't beat each other up because we're morally superior? And those people are committing the most heinous crimes and suppressing the public's ability to even talk about it. and taking over NPR and PBS. Just like Marcus Garvey was there to convince American-born Americans, Black people who had never seen any place but America, and you could look at the Smithsonian Institute pictures of dark-skinned, African-featured American Indians on the East Coast. Not the pictures they take now where the Indians look European, where the people from Papua New Guinea look European, where the people from New Zealand look European, where the people from Australia look European, where the people from America look European. The Europeans put their face on everything, their brand on everything. They took our Aunt Jemima off of rice so that no one will remember how important American Blacks are to American nutrition and cuisine. They took Uncle Ben off the box to erase it. But little Debbie, she's still on her cake creams because they're erasing us. Erasing us from the face of the earth. And I'm here, a political prisoner, being held in a concentration camp, cornered here and held here by economic deprivation, despite every single success that I achieved in the world. They pulled all the rugs out when they put Tina Ainley out on me. Do you know that when Tina Ainley could not capture me in her court because those charges were so flimsy, she would not let me have a hearing or a trial? She just kept calling me up again and again and again to torture me, to wear me down, to make me lose faith, so I would get in the same state of mind that I got into when I walked into the hospital in Meriden. I walked into the community hospital in Meriden and ended up talking to a nervous, nerve-wracked, anorexic social worker who committed me to a mental institution as a threat to Europeans. That's what she told me. She said, I'm doing it because you're a threat to the Europeans. And I said, I didn't say I was a threat to the Europeans. I said that I've lost hope in life and my future, and I want to kill myself because European racists have blocked my every ability to ascend in society. They've made it impossible for me to make a living. And as long as European supremacy is the rule of the day and the number one priority in America, I can't survive. That's what I told you. But she was a licensed clinical social worker working on her degree, working nights in the hospital. And when she heard that I wasn't down with European national supremacy, she decided to ruin my life by committing me to the hospital. She didn't advise me to go to a group therapy. I didn't get access to group therapy or even get to hear about it until I had been through a lot of really lousy psychiatrists that did nothing but prescribe medicines for me, experimental medicines, new medicines. Oh, you're still depressed because you don't have a life? Well, a new medicine came out. And those medicines work. They make you forget that you're even living. You're just taking the medicine, falling asleep. You don't even have dreams when you sleep anymore when you start taking those medicines. Your whole consciousness becomes disconnected from you. So it becomes very easy for a hacker to come in and just siphon money out of your bank account because you're not paying attention. You don't have the mind anymore. You're being drugged every day. It took me years to get back my mental clarity. And Juan was a really big help. I know that he profited from me being on psychotropic medicine, but he's the one who said Ambien causes heart attacks. Because once they created Ambien, you could really zone out of reality. You could really go into a deep and dreamless, death-like sleep. So when I actually decided to kill myself because there was no avenue for me to live, there was no way for me to fulfill any purpose, whatever mission I was sent here for was destroyed by my fate. And my fate was to live in a white supremacy filled with Europeans acting individually, but according to a shared agenda according to a mutual agreement, unspoken, but as old as blood libel and as effective. And I said, there's no way out of here. There's no way out at all. And by then they'd already infected me with Morgellons. But it was silently working on me because I went to work on it right away. I started getting treatments for Lyme disease right away. I started following protocols that I found online right away. So in terms of me developing sores and having fibers extruding from my skin and having insect parts extruding from my skin, the disease did not get that far in me. But it still created an infrastructure that when Marcus Smith, who I believe is in the military, but is also a child pimp, he also was supervising the people that would come to this hotel to buy some children for sex. He was also a big part of that, which I'm sure that if you look across the world, you'll find a lot of United States of America military involved in the importation and trafficking of children, because they've got the transportation and they've got the system and they've got the people that enlisted in the military so they could hurt people. That was what they went in for. They weren't drafted. They said, I want to learn how to kill. That's my dream job, killing people, especially people from foreign lands, and stealing their stuff and trafficking their children that are orphans because I killed their parents. Those are the people that were in the military. Those are people that joined the military. So it's not unusual to have concentration camp guards that are inflicting weapons upon the heiresses of America who are trapped here as prisoners, being gassed, being shot with projectiles, having my contact lenses damaged and destroyed, and then having Marcus put a nanobot on my pillow that would crawl into my ear and continue the infection and use pathways in my body created by the Morgellons that have been operating for decades inside of me. So you see, I need a medical professional that can actually get their head around that and get beyond it. I need somebody with access to Charles Lieber's nanotechnology bioweapon database of information. We need the next generation of warriors that can save the people who are victim of the bioweapons and make sure that the bioweapons do not get further than here. And that's quite a task. That's quite a task. And that's why I want to believe in Farsight Institute. And I actually do believe in Farsight Institute. Now, Elena Dana, Daana, I don't believe in her. She just hits me wrong. I'm almost positive she's in this as a scammer. And she's going to be a part of a big conference in September that she already started to advertise. But Farsight's not going to be there. Stephen Greer is not going to be there. Carrie Cassidy's not going to be there. Linda Moulton Howe is not going to be there. She's got a lot of people who are going to help you raise your consciousness and use your imagination to pretend that there are ETs. And not only is everyone in her conference and European, but the book she created of aliens, as she claims to be the Galactic Federation emissary that has met all of these different people, they all look like idealized Europeans. Every single one of them. None of them look like anybody real from any planet. People from real planets look like us. But she wrote a whole book designed to appeal to children, filled with races of people from other planets and pictures of them looking like white people. So Americans are Europeans. Australians are Europeans. Papua New Guinea people are Europeans. New Zealanders are Europeans. Hawaiians are Europeans. Americans are Europeans. People from other planets are Europeans. Maybe different colors, maybe, some different little things added, but European hair, European noses, European mouths, European genetics. She didn't make anybody African a part of the advanced civilization societies. And that is predictive programming racism. That makes people like me say, well, if she's telling the truth and she's a Galactic Federation emissary, then my people don't survive. We don't even make it off this planet. And we don't exist anywhere but here. You see? You see how that gets into your mind? It's like when Gail Partells told me that I wasn't qualified to be at Northwestern. And I'm getting grades that make it look that way. But I had just come from Canada, where I was a B+ student, competing against the Europeans, excelling in my chosen field of literature, getting A's and A's and A's. Having grades good enough to go to Northwestern University. But when Gail told me I didn't deserve to be there, it worked on me. It worked on all of us. So when Elena DeAnna presents images of Europeans only in the advanced societies, it works on you. And then when she goes to a conference and advertises her conference, and none of the most credible speakers are going to be there. The only person that I would call credible that's going to be there is the guy named Wills. A guy named Wills, who actually went to Peru and had an interdimensional experience in another dimension that I found very believable, because the Peruvians, there was a picture of the portal, and the Peruvian shaman verified his story, and the Peruvian folklore among the people verified the experience that he would be having. And when he said that he spoke 3 tones, musical tones at the door, and found himself transported, I believed it. And when he said that he was an orphan that was found, and that he was 6'8", I believed that he was descended from the people on another planet and put here on Earth. And when I heard that Eisenhower had an exchange program to insert people from other planets that looked humanoid into our society, I believed that this guy was one of them. This Mr. Wills was one of them. I found him credible. But the other people at this coming to this conference, they're mostly soft people. And if Dana DeAnna actually is a Galactic Federation emissary, why didn't she answer my communication to her? Why didn't she answer my email? Why didn't she answer my YouTube comment? Why is she so nervous now? These are things I ask myself. So as I reached this deadline where if there are good ETs, I needed them to show themselves, because the biological weapons attacks against me are accelerating since that blackout on Monday, and even before. The attacks, the more Starlinks they send up, the sicker I seem to be getting, in a way, right? And I don't even know, what's going on with my abdomen, because that happened after they held me in jail. They could have infused my body with the pumping mechanism for a bioweapon. I don't know. I just know that if there is a Harvey, like Farsight Institute says, that there are good ETs. And if there are good ETs, there is a possibility that we can undo the effects of this bioweapon and disable every single Starlink that Elon Musk and the Nazis, the Werner von Braun Nazis, because von Braun is obviously an alien too, and that's why Elon laughs. when he says, and that's why he pretends that he doesn't even know about a Mars colony, because he's trying to find people that are willing to kill themselves on a suicide journey to another planet. For all I know, Elon was a Martian, one of the Martians that destroyed the Martian colony and then escaped here. Like Superman's parents put him in a little capsule and sent him off to Earth so he could survive Jor-El and the other scientists' destruction of Superman's home planet. And it was a crystal that weakened him. If you held a kryptonite crystal in it, he lost all of his strength and all of his supernatural powers. Didn't he? And in one of the last Superman movies, you actually saw criminals that had been encased in an interdimensional prison. You actually saw them land on the Earth and be released to create havoc here. Well, they call this a prison planet, don't they? And they don't mean just Earthian prisoners. I believe that all the galaxies have sent their psychopaths here. And I used to believe that it was because there's a catastrophic event headed for this planet. And although I just love watching Dutch, and I love watching, the other people who give me comfort during my time in this prison, I don't believe all those earthquakes are going to lead to the destruction of the Earth. I don't believe that Nancy Lederer and her conversations with the Zeta Reticuli people, they never said that the Earth would be destroyed. They just said there'd be huge population disruptions. So I have to believe that I'm not going to be getting off this planet. I'm not going to be, raptured, which was my idea of being recruited into Star Trek and taken into the next level of training, right? Yet I can't deny my experiences in Las Vegas. But guess what? Maybe I'm just mentally ill. Maybe I'm just delusional. Maybe I'm just a new brand of schizophrenic. And I don't believe that. I believe that there are imposters in the ET disclosure community. And I believe that there are real people telling a real story of real people. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the Sasquatch story that I put in one of my posts, you might want to. Because they talk about the ant people, and the Navajo and the Hopi people talk about the ant people. And I saw very interesting ant colonies in the barren deserts, in the ruins of northern Arizona, around rocks that looked like they were sculptures and statues and buildings that had been destroyed by huge bombs that came from outer space and landed in that big disaster mess look in Arizona. When you see it up close, you can actually see the infrastructure of a giant society. And I already told you that I spent the night in a road I could never find again, among people taking care of me that mentally communicated with me that they were the Sasquatch. But then I didn't have the knowledge of Sunbow True Brother. I didn't have his story of the Sasquatch people. I didn't have any stories of the Sasquatch people except sightings in YouTube videos. But in terms of Sasquatch communications that were coherent, that integrated with what I knew about galactic history and the history of the Earth, if you listen to that audiobook or buy the book if you're still a reader, from Sunbow True Brother, and visit his website for more information. But just listening to the 2-hour read of that book yesterday and the day before gave me great enlightenment that my experience with the Sasquatch was real. And the message of the Sasquatch is have love and compassion and empathy. And isn't that the most intelligent message that there is? Isn't that the most real thing that you can aspire to? Because when I knew I was going to the Ivy League, I thought I was going to the heart of the highest morality, because I've always associated morality with intelligence, because I've always thought you have to be stupid to poop in your own soup. You have to be stupid and crazy to use evil to contaminate your own social environment. You have to be crazy to steal, especially to make a living. If you're young and you steal once or twice and you see how it feels to be a thief, your conscience is going to say, ooh, she's crying because I stole her belt and I can't give it back. Ooh, I feel terrible, right? So if you steal, as I have done, I've stolen, but it made me feel terrible. It made me know I don't want to be a thief. I want to earn my way in life. I don't want to be a criminal. And I've never killed anyone. Once or twice I've wanted to commit murder against someone that had hurt me so much that I just wanted to smash them out of reality. But I don't stay there. I don't plot and plan. I don't indulge those feelings, because you kill people and you go to prison and your life is over. That's stupid. You see, that was before I knew that there was such a thing as satanic cults. That's before I knew that psychopaths were being recruited into leadership positions, that psychopaths were being given huge rewards, that psychopaths were occupying the military, the CIA, the FBI, the House of Representatives, the Congress. I don't for one moment think that that Congresswoman who submitted the bill to stop NPR public funding, I don't for 1 minute think that she's doing it for me and for the liberation of American people. Because I've been to Upper New York State and I've seen how the Europeans have treated the Oneida Indians and the other tribes there. I've seen them living on welfare and poverty while the Europeans are building wonderful sex toy mansions and having NASCAR races right there at Wadsworth Fall. And you can feel the portals there. When you drive around that area, you can feel the portals. You can feel them vibrating, just like you can north of Wickenburg in Arizona. You can feel the vibrations of the portals that the Europeans control. The Europeans kill the natives and steal the portals, steal the agricultural lands, steal the dairy lands. You'll see a lot of Mennonites in and out of their religion. You'll see a lot of Mennonites with maps of where they all are living. You'll see a lot of Mennonites controlling the entire dairy industry in the Finger Lakes. But you won't see empowered Indians. You'll see what they're doing to the Erie Canal and the way they're using the Great Lakes to import products to Scandinavia through the St. Lawrence Seaway. You'll see how the Europeans have created their transportation supply chain to rob America when you go to Upper New York State. So I don't for 1 minute think that the European woman, Connolly, is that her name? I don't think for 1 minute that she plans to stop Catherine Maher. I think she just drafted that bill as a way to have leverage over NPR to make sure that they come out her friends. I think she did it as a political thing. I don't think she did it to really get honest broadcasting of American lives for Americans. But I think you have to agree. I mean, if you actually get to hear my story, I think you have to agree that every step I've made, every success in my life has been taken away from me by the Europeans. And that they gained so much power that they could use Honda dealerships to steal my car and swap in a salvage vehicle. And then use Geico Insurance Company that I've been paying for decades to deny my claim and insinuate that I'm the criminal and re-traumatize me by constantly repeating to me the story of how I was kidnapped and tortured into being crippled. Yes, I've healed so much. My back hurt a lot last night, but it was because I was just laying down so long, because my depression is increasing. The longer I have to realize that I'm going to have to live and fight here, that I'm not going to be taken off this planet. This planet is not going to be destroyed. It's been here for billions of years already. It's not going to be destroyed by these earthquakes happening. These earthquakes are probably just the collapsing of the underground facilities. It might even be a war between the ant people and the reptilians. I mean, I saw wildfires burning hot red in Arizona where there's nothing to burn unless you put it there. And I saw deep fires burning in Arizona and New Mexico. Back when Trump was president, he was burning them out of there. But I maintain that the real Donald Trump was killed around the COVID time, that they actually found a way to murder him. And I believe that he was an eternal, and Donald Trump wasn't his first identity or his first attempt to control the enemies. I believe that he had close ties in identity to General Patton. General Patton was sidelined during World War II because he was against the Nazis. So they sidelined him. But Donald Trump was against the Nazis too. And the Nazis and the Jews unified and prosecuted him using a very corrupt legal system that prosecuted me too, that prosecutes my people, the real Americans, every single day. And yet we're supposed to go on this way? We're supposed to just go on this way? Well, I was glad that NPR had a story today about suicide, because they're killing me here. They're killing me with bioweapons, and it's touchless now. They don't have to shoot the projectiles that activate my veins and make veins stick out, activating the Morgellons pathway. They don't have to actually have people shoot me anymore in the eyes. Put nanobots on my bed or in my lamp, on my desk, like Kedra did. They don't have to do it like that anymore. I don't even know if they still need those Morgellons fibers, although they probably do. In fact, the Starlink might even activate and direct the direction that these fibers go through. You see, I have a barrier on my door that covers all the cracks. And I think that's why I don't have a lot of those nanofibers, microfibers in here right now. I think I'm blocking them from getting in, because you can come in through the crack of a door, can't you? You can come in through the crack of a door if all you have to do is direct a microfiber using an automated system on a Starlink satellite that's right over my head. We've gotten so much disclosure about the technological capabilities that the advanced races have shared with the European nationalist military. And they have so much capability that they can target just that specifically, just that individually. And when I was in Arizona doing reconnaissance for my team, the opposition, the resistance to European nationalist racism and the takeover of America, they actually attacked me with a defibrillation machine that they wheeled in on a little tricycle machine, because I landed at a place where a lot of young Europeans were with ATVs doing military exercises. They had built potholes in the road leading up to the big opening where they were all parked. And when I left there, they had filled the potholes in, because they put those potholes there to stop people from coming in there and finding them. But they aimed a defibrillation machine at me, and I was able to use one of those one of those reflective material sunscreens to deflect some of the rays, but I still could feel it. And I was able to use my meditation. I'm not a yogi, but I try to practice yogic breathing and mind control. And I was able to not get a heart attack, but I recognized that they were aiming a machine at me that was giving me fibrillations in my heart. And I later read or saw on a YouTube disclosure that they were able to put those defibrillation guns on the bed of a pickup truck to give people in traffic heart attacks. So when it comes to touchless murder of American citizens and landowners, we've got that here. And my family went from Texas to Oklahoma, went from North Carolina to Oklahoma, and oil land. First, they stole our agricultural farmlands on the East Coast in the Carolinas, put us on that Trail of Tears to Oklahoma, where it was just tar. And then they find that the tar is oil and that oil has a commodifiable value. So they started getting us out of there. The Osage flower incident, the Dust Bowl, the Tulsa riots. The Europeans formally attacked us. We were Gaza. But that's not a history that's being told. Now, wouldn't you like to hear that history on NPR and PBS? I mean, if you look at the records of ancestry, you will find that you cannot find who Dionne Warwick's slave ancestors were. Because just like you don't record the name of a cow that you're going to sell, you didn't record the name of slave births. And in the country, people didn't record everybody's birth. They recorded it in the Bible. They didn't have a city hall. They didn't have a county hall. They didn't have a county. They didn't have the government structure that created these boundaries. So there are no documents. But when PBS has a Harvard scholar tell all these people that their ancestors were slaves, they're able to keep alive the legacy of the myth of the proliferation of slavery, instead of understanding that it was a very limited event that got big publicity. Kind of like Taylor Swift. A small event that gets so much publicity that it just dominates the scene and you can't see anything else. So Henry Louis Gates's work was to keep the myth of slavery alive and active in the present time by telling celebrities, important people, you have slaves in your background. And I did the research. Before Henry Louis Gates found that as his next con, I did research to find my family roots. And I saw where the trail ends. There wasn't always a census. There weren't always birth certificates. And a lot of them were written by hand. And a lot of the census records are illegible. You can't read the details, and you don't know what the inferences are. So even if you've got the best researchers that Harvard University can hire, you cannot make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. You cannot make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. You cannot create documentation that never fucking existed. Unless you're Henry Louis Gates, a known plagiarist who has the balls to steal from the Ford Foundation, launch the career of other people. They didn't deny my book. I sent him my book. I sent him email copies of my book. I sent the president of his university email copies of my book. They never denied it because they knew they didn't have to deny it, because they knew I'd be silenced and ultimately put in a concentration camp and subjected to biological weapons, while Henry Louis Gates would be the guy that sits with Obama on the porch with the policeman that tackled him and violated his human rights, saying, I don't have anything against police that beat black people. No, sirree. I'm the head Negro in charge, according to the New York Times of 1990, New York Times Magazine. I'm the head Negro in charge, and I like getting attacked by the cops and then having a Coors beer on the porch with the black president. who was born in another country and is a cousin to George Bush and on the inside track of the Hidden Hands. And I'm down with that because they pay me. I'm Henry Louis Gates, and PBS is going to give me the platform to tell lies on Dionne Warwick about her heritage and make her come from a slave past. When all you have to do is look at Dionne Warwick to see that, if anything, she had servants. If anything, she was an Egyptian royal. If anything, she was born a queen. You can't fake that. She didn't come from slaves. And neither did I. I came from landowners, forced into the plantation economy and then robbed of their lands. I came from people who had so much land that the Europeans mated with us so that they could get access to our property and make sure that our children were discredited and disinherited from our property. Because the European plan to take over American assets was a very long-term, multi-dimensional plan. And they achieved such a level of success now that they can use the courts. They can use this hotel to create a prison. They can use their army to attack me. They can use satellites to manipulate bioweapons that they're releasing into the atmosphere. They can contaminate the water so it ruins the quality of my hair if I wash my hair in their water. They can make sure that the dentists crack my teeth and put caps in there with things that are going to hatch out later when the right frequencies are presented through the satellites, through the bioweapons. You see, there are no coincidences here. I'm being ignored to death because the system of power has enough power to step on me like I'm nothing. They've got Tina Ainley killing Indians, making them go into bankruptcy with fines and charges. They've got the Bureau of Indian Affairs making sure that Indians do not have the power to develop their own lands. They've got Judge Butner and the governor of Oklahoma making sure that I'm too afraid to even go back to Oklahoma where I've got plenty of land. I even saw a well cap on my grandfather's land that I inherited, my great-great-grandfather's land. And the land that Mady Gaines Harrison inherited in Texas, well, the Texas Rangers were known for their sadism. They were known for their open genocidal tendencies. So when Governor Greg Abbott gets in there and gives clemency to a man who was known to be killing Americans, is anybody surprised? Is anybody surprised that there's no protection for Americans anywhere in this country because they've used their manifest destiny to get judicial and legislative and executive power that they bestow upon the corporations that are mostly owned by Europeans? And even the lawyers belong to the British Accreditation Registry, right? Now, I have a lot of people to thank for teaching me what I know, but let me tell you this, I am old and wise. I didn't always know these things, and I didn't always know how to do a David Icke and put the pieces together to make the puzzle and do it fast. I had to develop these skills because I used to believe that in the Ivy League, I would find the people with the highest moral values because high moral values go hand in hand with high intelligence. Unless you're a psychopath. But I bet if you put a non-psychopath genius up against a psychopath genius, I bet the non-psychopath would have a higher level of intelligence every time. Because if we didn't have a higher level of intelligence than the psychopaths, we wouldn't be able to see through them. We can't anticipate the things they do because we're not evil people. But we can uncover the things they do and know where to point the finger and know where to apply the remedies. So I'm just about finished with this broadcast. I know it's going a long time, but I'm really trying to get attention out here. I'm going to be sure to tag all the news agencies so they have no excuses. They can't say that they didn't know. They're going to know the story of Silver Ring Runningcloud. And later on today, I'm going to do another Commander Runningcloud's log, because I just am not ready to give up hope in a good ET intervention, because it wouldn't be the first time that the most advanced civilizations actually helped Earthians thrive and survive. And that's where all my marbles are, okay? Because the here and now, I don't expect NPR to call me tomorrow and say, let's start telling your story. Let's start telling the story of how European nationalism has destroyed your entire life. In every decade, the Europeans have stolen the profits that you made, stolen your accomplishments, stolen your recognition, and driven you deeper and deeper and deeper into despair. An inverse relationship. The more I achieve, the more the Europeans attack, oppress, marginalize, and destroy me. The more I achieve, the more the enemy pushes me down. It's an inverse relationship between achievement that's not psychopathic, achievement designed to help humanity rise, and the fierce oppression from our enemies. And now they're in the skies, okay? Now you tell me how we're going to get rid of Starlink if we don't have good ET allies and spaceships up there ready to disable the technology and reprogram them. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the Commander Runningcloud log. I'm going to talk about my commands to reprogram Elon Musk's Starlink and stop the brainwashing of humanity and stop the targeting of people and start curing, using their magical frequencies, the people who are infected, as I am, with Morgellons and other forms of bio-nanotechnology that exploit the networks that Morgellons has created in the human Earthian bodies. And they got that technology from the bad ETs. Thank you for joining me. And I just want to remind people how much I love people. I love Narendra Modi for the way he goes out among all of the people of India, letting them know that they have a leader that's engaged with them, that cares about their problem, and that this leader has a lot of political people in his party, and that they're going to make sure that life gets better and better and better for the people of India. That gives me goosebumps. Do you see the goosebumps? I like Xi Jinping of China, who gave a speech today about standing by the Palestinians and using the ancient Silk Highway, a trade route from before the Europeans awoke from their caves and stopped eating their babies in the winter. There was the Silk Road trade route. And the president of China, Xi Jinping, reminded everybody of the ancient roots of the peaceful alliance and trade relationship between the Arabs and the people of China. Hearing the beautiful words that Xi Jinping spoke about peace and integrity and love and fairness and justice. Well, look, I have goosebumps once again, goosebumps, because I emotionally resonate with those best intentions, because only the best intentions can save the human race on earth. Psychopaths are not going to save us. They're going to lead us down, down, down. Do you know how ruined a child's life is when they're traded for sex? Do you know how many baby prostitutes they kept in that stable? And they were mostly boys, and their favor of toddler girls? Each time I've seen toddler girls. And 7, 8-year-old boys seem to be, 6 to 8-year-old boys seem to be the specialties. So by the time the boys are getting 10, 11, and 12, that's when they start getting recruited into the other parts of the crime, because they're just not as popular with the pedophiles and the prepubesciphiles that are the clients. So here I am with these kind of people who are also a part of the American military. And we've got officers coming in because they look too high class, and they're talking to Marcus Smith, who attacked me, who deployed the weapons on me. And Marcus Smith is also the pimp that tells the clients which rooms to find the child prostitutes in. Not that the rooms aren't marked. The rooms are marked, so they're easy to find. But that was hard to watch. And after Puffy, there were some crackdowns here in Houston. And then they just didn't want to take the risk anymore of me documenting their activities and showing all the little boys walking around in winter with no shirt and no shoes on. They didn't want me talking about the donations of clothes and educational toys that I gave them that they sold, because they want to keep those baby hoes in line and not give them any hope for the future. But imagine if you're one of those children, because I met them too. I met the ones that aged out of the system, the girls that got too old to be sold as child prostitutes anymore. And they were bitter, angry, and violent. They threw rocks at my car. They chased me. They stalked me. They shot pellet guns at me that would hit me. And their guardians just watched it. And some of them looked like they would have come from good families, but their families got caught up on the wrong side of the law and put in prison. So they were in foster care, and their foster care guardians were pimps and pimped them out. And I have to live and see that, right? But if I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't have believed it. And if I can just get back to believing that I have a good future, I'll understand why I've had to see all these terrible things. And part of me feels like it's the mind control that has me sinking into depression and giving up hope on this fantastic life I've imagined for myself. But it's not just that. It's that I already communicated through mental telepathy that if any of this is real, you need to start being aggressive in saving me, because the disease is moving through the teeth that are good. The disease is reactivating in my ears. The disease is making my legs thump and my hips and my buttocks, because whatever bioweapon that occupies my body has gotten a new lease on life. And I can't stop it. I'm just a person. I don't have advanced technology. I can only figure this disease out by the symptoms, by reverse engineering. And then when I go and check, I find that DARPA has the patent. How did DARPA even get to exist? Nobody asked us. They used the European nationalist legislators, the people in Congress who were supposedly elected. But do you really think that if the votes had ever been real, that the 50% of real Americans, maybe 70 when you add the Indians to the blacks, Do you really think they would have elected their enemies to go to Congress and make the laws? Do you really think our nation would have elected nothing but Europeans and European sympathizers into our Congress? Or do you think that you'd see more diversity, not only of the race, but of the interests? And do you think the interests would actually be about Americans if we actually elected our representatives? No. They all work for the United States of America Corporation. And the United States of America Corporation has been mobilizing groups like the League of Women Voters for years and years and years and years and years. Maybe when they very first created that Declaration of Independence, that Constitution of the United States, maybe when they created it knowing that they were going to have their own people in, knowing that they were talking to themselves, knowing that they were not creating a contract between the government of America and the American people, but they were creating a contract between the foreign-owned United States corporation and the corporation investors in Europe. We're not even a part of that contract. All you have to do is listen to the lecturers at Hillside College talk about who the Constitution really pertains to and what all of those protections are standing for. They weren't protected us, but they knew that if they taught us that we weren't being protected or put it in language that was clear enough for us to read it, because I've tried to read the Constitution a million times and I don't understand because I don't speak European. I speak American, and they have convoluted the language, but people have siphoned enough of it out to have it mean equality, because that's what we all wanted. Because the only way that the enemy, the European nationalist racists, the only way that they could advance without getting wiped out before they got started, before they were able to develop enough power to come at us, before they were able to have enough people in the suburbs and enough of an immigration system to be sure that they became the majority in certain regions and be sure that they were the only ones with economic power, it took decades, century to achieve that, and they couldn't have us showing out. They couldn't have us making a real civil war, which would be a race war of the Europeans versus the rest of us. They had to be sure our hands were tied. They had to be sure that we were in cuffs. They had to be sure we were in concentration camps by the time my generation was ready to inherit my $1 billion of stuff. They had to have their level of aggression so high, the openness of their crimes so high, but they knew that the gin-jib blood libelous system and their other peers, the Rotary Club and Lions Club, and all the other European nationalist racists that knew racism was why they had the nice house without working. Let them know why they were able to cheat themselves into assets and know why they were able to be investors, just skimming the top off of everybody's work in the economy. Because the stock market is a privately owned organization too, you know. The Chicago Mercantile was owned by a person, and they traded commodities there. And all the other people, all the other Europeans, they want to be a part of it. Like the lords and ladies who are going to share your stuff. But every time a dividend is paid to an investor, and most Americans, working Americans, cannot afford to be long-term investors. You might get in and out of the market after a pump and dump campaign draws you in by making it sound like easy money, and all you have to do is do this, and look how much money I got, and look how much money Bobby got, and you can get this money too. All you have to do is tighten your belt a little bit. Just tighten your belt and get on Robinhood, where they'll keep your money for over a week, trading on your money just for you to get in the club. And there'll be organizations like the Oxford Club, of which I believe I'm a member. When they found out I was an heiress, they invited me to be a member of the Oxford Club. And the purpose of the Oxford Club is to protect investors, just like the SEC protect investors. But let's face it, people, I was from the affluent class, and every time I invested, something happened that made me need my money. And it just so happened that every time I needed my money because of an external circumstance, the market was dipping. And I lost every time. Because you can know when regular people are going to need money. If you're going to manipulate mortgages, they're going to need money. If you're going to manipulate rents using real estate associations, they're going to need money. If you raise licensing fees for professions, they're going to need money. If you increase the number of licenses needed, they're going to need money. If you increase taxes, they're going to need money. And if it's time to pay the tuition, and the tuition has risen to more than you make in a year or 2 or 5, then you're going to need money. So the idea that a regular person is going to invest in the stock market and hold on to it for the 20 years it takes to really become a millionaire, it's impossible. Once they know you have that money, they will individually target you with lawsuits, repair bills on your home or properties, complete losses of your investments, like Stagecoach stock that became worthless, like the Gould Corporation that became worthless. They will make sure they rob you if you're one of the little people. Okay? So the entire system of the stock market is a predatory system. But so many little people buy in without understanding that even if you last for a while, eventually they're going to come and wipe you out. You'll be Madoffed one way or another. And they won't catch Madoff until he's in his 80s. So you stand to lose a lot. And before we had Madoff, we had the Bush brothers from Texas who put the savings and loans into bankruptcy. And the FDIC had to change all of its terms and say, oh, you're not really insured for your lost money. You know how many European senior citizens had to live in poverty after the savings and loans went bankrupt? And it was all a scam. All that money was stolen. Well, don't be fooled. Ultimately, the people that run the investment exchanges are going to end up the only winners in the investment market. And along the way, they're going to be skimming and raising the cost of doing business by paying dividends and paying for the prices of stocks. They need new, fresh money all the time. That's why they're always trying to get new people to buy in to those old charts. But if everybody went to the stockbroker tomorrow and said, cash us all out, we're gonna buy some land and start our own factories, the stock market would collapse. It's a giant Ponzi scheme. Why doesn't NPR talk about that? That would be something really important for Americans to know, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be important for you to know that when you get a dividend, they took it from somebody else who actually did the work, that actually paid the bill, and that the idea of money for not working, money for free, is another way to say we found a way to steal and not get caught. We've institutionalized theft and incorporated the process. You see? But these are truths that are dangerous, right? Because if investors actually have to get out here and compete for assets with the rest of us, guess what'll happen? We'll revert to the old days, just like Karen Hudays said we would. We'll revert to the days where you buy your house once, you buy your land once, and you own all the rights to all the layers of your land. You don't get your mineral rights sold out to some investor who has the right to dig up your property and cut it into pieces. You have sovereignty. Because once you own your own house, you don't need a mortgage, do you? You don't need a banker, do you? Because you already got your house. You know what you need after you get your house? You need a hardware store. You need an education and trade. You need access to markets for home convenience products. You need furniture makers. You need artisans that make wrought iron fences. You need craftsmen that take pride in their work, that find a sense of purpose, getting up every day, taking their bath or shower, putting their work clothes on, and getting out there and doing something that matters. Being useful, being productive, having a sense of purpose, not just sitting around, getting money for nothing, eating, watching TV, getting drunk, having sex with children, putting sex on TV, prosecuting presidents that are trying to help us out, putting fake presidents up there, believing in all the myths, telling all the lies. It all falls apart when the stock market falls apart and people own their home and people can have a little flock of sheep in their community, and they don't have to go to New Zealand and Australia, European supply chain to get their lamb. They get better lamb that grazes on American fields, that are no longer plantations run by machinery owned by the Scandinavians, who are exporting it through the Great Lakes and out the St. Lawrence Seaway and right across, while they keep their villages and their properties, and they get their second homes in Hawaii and the West Indies, where they make sure that those people, those real landowners, never are recognized as the real owners, as the guardians and caretakers of the land. Because that's what makes you own something. When you love it and you take care of it and you cultivated it, that's love. Love is not sitting back in some penthouse suite or flying your private airplane and collecting the cream of everybody else's labor, the cream of what the people that actually try to control the land are doing. But so people cannot claim the land, they've even made automation. If you drive across America now, you'll see so many miles and miles of crops with no people, no children playing, nothing. They even created laws to prevent children from working. And my fondest memories of spending time with my family was making jewelry and things to sell to the Masons. The black Masons were different from the white Masons, not the Illuminati, but it was more of a social club. And we used to make things to sell to the Elks at the Savoy Club in New York. You know, their medallions. My grandmother used to design church hats, and we would glue her, use Elmer's glue to glue her label in the back. Fans was her brand, because she was always into selling cosmetics. She had a store in Brooklyn at a corner that still has a cosmetics store, but they cheated her and drove her out of business, made her almost bankrupt. She had to live with my mother and our family to try to recover from her start in business. And she was very smart. And that was after they drove her off her Oklahoma oil land with Sun Oil Company, using mineral rights, oil, law, special body of law. Douglas Rogers of Yale University, the Russian oil speculator, can tell you all about the laws the Europeans made just for the oil and gas industry to be able to steal our stuff. The corruption in America is wide and deep. And all of the public broadcasting and all of the publishing, they don't tell anything about it, because they plan to duplicate this again and again and again in places like Africa, in China, if they can get into China, which they never will. In Arabia, they plan to duplicate this land takeover, this takeover of the assets from the actual owners. They're going to play it out again and again and again. And if I get attention, and you see I'm telling on them, and I'm telling you the truth, they're not going to get very far, are they? They'll be stopped in their tracks, all because of me. And that's why they've made sure that I don't get anything, that I don't get my $1 billion in stocks and bonds and valuable lands in America that my ancestors collected and preserved and paid taxes on for me. They won't let me protect my assets to pass on to my children. My children have to struggle and fight and compete with Europeans who get better access and better privileges while doing less work than my children. My children get it worse than me because they don't even get to know about their inheritances. Least wise get to touch it. Least wise get to develop it. Least wise get to build my own corporate plaza for Crystal Data Systems and the Runningcloud Group LLC. Both of them, Crystal Data Systems LLC, the Runningcloud Group LLC. The Runningcloud Group does entertainment, production, publishing, art, and Crystal Data Systems, the guardians of cyberspace security, and video games, and Deck Land Management, the company that oversees everything. I wrote an entire corporate plan when I was expecting my multi-million-dollar inheritance for how to make my money grow so that my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and the ones that come after that would be able to thrive. But you want to know what my family is facing? We're facing genocide. My children don't think they can afford to have children. And I thought I couldn't afford more than 2. If I'd had more than 2, we would have gone bankrupt. We wouldn't have been able to educate them. We wouldn't have been able to send them to ballet school or send them to Eagle Scout camp. We wouldn't have been able to do much because the Europeans made sure that we were going to live in the worst house on the edge of town, that my doctor husband was always going to be scrambling for a job or being underpaid or being abused on his job so he couldn't spend time with our family, that he wasn't going to have the kind of control that we expected when we first decided as a people, medical school or law school is the only way to get around the Europeans destroying your economic future. And the Europeans decided that they would make the HMO, that they would own the admissions process, that they would destroy the black medical schools, that they would control the match process that decides your specialty and where you're going to live, that they would control the residency programs, that they would control the HMOs that gave you jobs, that they would legislate that you have to have a HMO job, that they control the insurance industry. They got control of everything at an executive management level and made it impossible for American doctors to have the freedom to succeed based on their own merit. My doctor husband had hands that emanated heat from his healing power. He was able to heal me from a lot, including mental distress that I experienced when I finished putting myself through college all by myself, being a victim of rape, of cold, of hunger, of fear, of isolation, of alienation, of loneliness. He was able to cure me of all that, but when he put his warm hand on me, I could just feel his healing power. I stopped having migraine headaches for a while anyway. So there was so much good in him, but he was born a healer. He was able to overcome a lot of barriers to become a medical doctor. A lot of people thought he wouldn't make it, but he did make it because he's naturally a healer, and it was his destiny to be a doctor. But it wasn't his destiny to be trapped in a European nationalist racist economic system that constrained his ability to earn, that constrained his ability to profit from his beautiful bedside manner and his healing hands. They made sure that he had to toe the line like everybody else so that we could survive. So I'm finished now. I'm not going to go on with this report. I've pretty much told everything that I have to say. I'll just say this now. I'm going to do a Commander Runningcloud's log, maybe not. It all depends, on how I'm feeling and what I get involved with. Because I was going to broadcast earlier, but I had such a good time with Sergey at the White Knights in Russia on his St. Petersburg walk and tour. And then I had such a wonderful time listening to Gina Marie Colvin Hill talk about how your home reflects your attitude. So I've I got all my trash off my floor and did some cleaning up around here, and it does feel fresher and more light. I still have a lot to do, but I'm hoarding. I'm hoarding stuff. I came here with nothing, but now that I have stuff, I feel like, ooh, I don't want to get rid of my stuff, and I don't want to get manic and throw things out, in some kind of, because in my mind, divesting myself of these possessions is saying that I'm getting out of here. And the only way I want to get out of here is if I'm going to something better, if I'm going to be able to enjoy the profits from my labor, if I'm going to be able to get my story out or leave a planet altogether to be a part of a more advanced society where psychopathy is eliminated, where high morality actually is a sign of high intelligence. Because that's what I thought. I thought the Ivy League would be the solution to the immorality I found in business and the European nationalist racism I found among my neighbors in Chicago and all the Europeans that I tried to befriend in business. I thought that once I got to the academy, especially the Ivy League, that I would find people that understood that societies and civilizations only thrive when there is a sound, good morality. Otherwise, they implode. Otherwise, they collapse. Otherwise, they become so top-heavy with evil predators that all the good just washes out. All the good people are killed by self-destruction or by weaponry or starvation or homelessness. And that's where you'll see America right now. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing a society so overwhelmed by evil at the top that the good people like me are being flushed down the toilet. I'm just target practice for the Europeans out here. So when I do Commander Runningcloud's log, I do it in the faith and hope that I'm communicating as an exo-political diplomat with the good ETs. And I'm doing it believing that the good ETs are superior militarily and in intelligence and in integrity and in love and compassion, superior to the bad ETs and their evil followers that have beaten me and put me in a prison where they're deploying bioweapons on me and just slowly eating me up from the inside of my own body with a disease so surreal and so horrifying that nobody wants to believe me. Nobody wants to pay attention to the idea that there are bioweapons being deployed on us and that the Starlink and Falcon 9s have something to do with it. And it's a part of a long-term plan by the Nazis, led by Wernher von Braun, the hidden hand, who has been succeeded by Elon Musk, a hologram avatar of Wernher von Braun, with an outrageous morality that believes in illegitimate children that he can't possibly have the time to raise because he's running so many companies, and every single company is a part of the system to destroy humanity. Twitter, where he says I'm all for free speech, but he censors me to the point where I leave, where he doesn't acknowledge me for being the most prolific tweeter, where he renames it something so generic that when you search for X, you're going to come up with an entire blockchain of data. Show me X. Everything with an X on it is going to come up. The blockchain that gets activated with X is huge, and he should have been prohibited from doing it, but people didn't understand what he was doing. And when I tried to tell them, they didn't listen to me. The Boring Company that creates underground facilities so that they can do the underground mining, so they can build a shack over acres of land in mineral-rich places like Arizona, mineral-rich places like countries in Africa, and they can hide everything they're doing and build underground caverns to do the mining and the manufacturing, to extract the minerals right under the people's noses, right under their eyes, and then transport them using private underground railroads that lead directly to privately owned ports. The Boring Company. Neuralink. Neuralink has already said they don't even need to put a device in your head. If you look at IBM Watson, one of the first artificial intelligences, will let you know that they can control your behavior with sound frequencies, odors and smells, lights. They proved it when they had the IBM Watson party. So Neuralink doesn't actually need to put a device in your head to control your mind. And they are all into the science of mind control. And then he owns SpaceX. SpaceX that uses inventions created with public funding to NASA and the military to create weapons that he's deploying in space and tells us nothing about. Our children aren't learning how to create rockets, but Elon Musk has gotten permission to use American lands, acquire them, take them over, build out into the Gulf of Mexico, under the water, into the Gulf of Mexico, from Florida to Texas to Mexico, building platforms under the water with his Boring Company, and then launching rocket ships. I visited SpaceX. Those are props. Those ships look as fresh and new as museum models. They never went into space. The only one that has damaged space is at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And if you visit the Johnson Space Center, you will see a lot of nothing. But you'll see that they took a lot of land for their museum. They have a lot of empty land. They have a lot of buildings. They have a lot of property outside of Houston, in Johnson City at the Johnson Space Center, out in Galveston as well. But if you want to see some inventions or knowledge, you're not going to see anything there at the Johnson Space Center. Not much at all. Because I was there and I looked inside the window. But they did have a Falcon X out, a Falcon 9, one of the first ones sent, and it did actually have scorch marks and those flippers on it. But the ones at Spaceport, at Boca Chica, they look fresh and new. They've never been anywhere. So that was a big farce. Maybe they launch it from, I don't know. Maybe they don't need to launch it. I mean, if the Nazis really did get in with time travelers and interdimensional enemies, and if the Nazis really did use portals to get as far as creating human, earthian trafficking and child trafficking in another galaxy, as I heard from military whistleblowers who did the 20 plus 20 and gave a report from the disclosure process, we learned that the Nazis got all the way to another galaxy with their criminal activities. So they might not be launching spacecraft for any kind of reason other than to put weapons into our atmosphere so that they can control the bioweapons that they're using against us here. So they can have a war that needs no soldiers at all because it's being conducted by SpaceX, an Elon Musk company. So that's 4 of them. Doesn't he have another company that's involved in nefarious? Oh, Tesla. That's right. Tesla. That builds these huge factories. How did they get access to non-contiguous properties? Those lands were non-contiguous. They didn't have the same owner. They had different owners, and he's built on Indian lands in Arizona and Indian lands in Texas. He's built on lands that don't belong to him. And he says he's manufacturing electric vehicles, but he's mining everything he needs to manufacture them from our land. And he's put so much computer hardware and software into these vehicles that they could be the ground force for the Starlink. So Elon Musk has created an entirely integrated war machine that will lead to touchless defeat and takeover of properties. He's used companies that depend on public funds, knowledge acquired over decades by Nazis and Germans and other Europeans that used our money but did not share the knowledge. They did not disseminate any of that knowledge of time travel, of ETs. They didn't disseminate any of that into our public education system. They kept it all for themselves. And then hired psychopaths of any race to be a part of their organization, because they have to be with people who are very comfortable killing people and torturing people and creating things that will torture and kill innocent people. You see, I was so innocent. I was aging innocently until I got thrown into this muck. And thank God that I was activated to do surveillance, to learn for myself, even to be forced here where I don't have a car because Honda stole my car and then repossessed the replacement car, the salvage vehicle that replaced the car they stole, and then resold the salvage vehicle to some stupid sucker in Mississippi through a Honda dealership. I saw it on Carfax. And then Geico cheated me, wouldn't pay for my car, so I couldn't leave here. I had no way to leave this hotel. But they'd already put the military here. They already had Sergeant Donna Joubert watching me. You know what Donna Joubert told me as she took over the front desk? She said that she'd been watching me for a while from her truck. That she was watching me. Because there was always a truck parked with the lights on every time I would come and go, watching. And that was Sergeant Joubert and her husband doing surveillance on me. And when she finally revealed, I asked her, are you the police? No, I'm a bounty hunter. Are you the military? No, I'm the bounty hunter. And then she goes off for training a couple of times, and she comes back admitting that she's Sergeant Joubert. I know I asked her one time what her children wanted to do. She had some children, and a couple of them were teenage twins. And she said, military. All my children go into the Army. All my children are military. But she didn't disclose that she was military too, and that this was a FEMA camp, concentration camp operation that they were starting here, and that I was one of the first prisoners because of my status as an heiress. And then they trapped me here. It looked like unrelated circumstances, but it was more like, that system where one thing leads to another. Not the domino system, the one that's more complex than that has the name of a Jew on it, where you might have a marble that falls out of a cup and hits a lever, and the lever goes up and releases a lever that drops a powder, and the powder drops down on a scale, and the scale goes down and sends a fluid up, and the fluid goes up and drips out into your cup. That's how they got me here. By a series. The Arizona enemies, Tina Ainley trying to get me locked up or put me in a mental institution with an undetermined exit date. I would lose my dog. I would lose my possessions. I would lose my credibility. I would lose my liberty without even having an honest process, without even me being mentally ill just because I resisted the system. Well, I escape from that and I end up here. I go to Brownsville. And I end up in Brownsville, where child trafficking is really intense there at the border. And the criminal class drives me away from there. And I'm driving here, and I'm driving through Houston because I need to get my car fixed so I can head back up north. I'm thinking maybe Connecticut. You know, I'm not remembering that Juan Luis Hernandez will probably kill me if I go back to Connecticut, which is why my ex-husband will not let me go back there, even though that is my permanent address and that is my official home. He won't let me go back there because Juan Luis made it very clear that I better not step foot in Connecticut again. And his brother, Diego Hernandez, in New York City judiciary and law enforcement, they won't let me go to Connecticut. But I didn't know what else I was going to do. I knew I wasn't going to stay in Texas, and especially not in Houston. Houston's horrible. The way they built the highway, the open theft, the transportation of minerals and oil, the dirty air, the evil ass people, the crime. I wasn't going to stay here. Houston is one of the worst cities I've ever been in, and an environmental threat, and a social disaster. I mean, I met Americans, Mexican, who were actually living in a fenced community. They were actually living in a housing development that was surrounded by fences with one way in and one way out, which is military. And I was telling the kids there, I'm fighting for you, I'm fighting for you. And they were just laughing because they already felt their futures were hopeless because they were living in Texas with the Europeans that made it very clear from the Texas Rangers forward. The Texas Rangers had the reputation for being the most sadistic. So I didn't want to live in Texas. Texas was where a man named Mr. Bird was dragged. He was tied to the back of a pickup truck by some Yahoo Europeans and dragged down the street until his body was shredded to pieces while he was still alive. That made national news. I didn't want to live in a place that didn't punish people that did that. Why, I even think that Zimmerman guy that was one of the first civilians to murder a Black American youth, he didn't get punished. They treated him like a little hero and created a precedent for letting civilians murder young Americans that made them feel they were under some kind of threat, using hoodies as the excuse, as the uniform of their enemy that they could shoot. And the guy named Zimmerman, he didn't even look like a Zimmerman. He didn't look like a Jew or a European. He looked like a Mexican. Okay? But there's no mystery that there's no love lost between Mexicans and Blacks, because a lot of Blacks came in as Buffalo Soldiers to kill the Mexicans as a part of the Texas Rangers, as a part of the European military force that fought with the real Americans for economic control of Texas, to take it away from Mexican government, which, wasn't as oppressive at that time. Okay, I guess I could go on and on and on and on and on, but it is like 8:04 here in Texas, and I probably have been on longer than you care to listen. It's just that I'm doing a marathon because I've got to get the news agencies aware that I know that they know the ball is in your court. I know that you know the ball is in your court. Are you going to play me out? Are you going to be complicit with the victimization? Are you going to let them continue to develop biological weapons and test them to the point where they'll deploy them on civilian populations in other countries where the people are starting to fight back, and then they'll be beaten by space-activated, space-borne bioweapons? Because that's the plan, That's the plan. So you, in the media, in broadcasting, you can do something about it. You can get NPR and PBS and CBS and NBC and ABC and CNN and MSNBC and BBC. You can get them to start talking about the story of Silver Rain Runningcloud and the destruction of American freedom and liberty and economy by European nationalist racism. You can make a difference in the world. You can be an agent for peace and love and liberty. I can't do it for you. Thank you for joining me.